truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
for insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths. We hold these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Well, welcome back to American Freedom. I'm Mike Pence, coming to you from Texas A&M. This podcast brought to you by Young America's Foundation, and it's my great privilege on this Veterans Day 2021 to welcome to this podcast someone who is very familiar to people that follow Congress and the public debate and the conservative movement. He has emerged as really one of the most important conservative voices on Capitol Hill, but brings with him a wealth of experience, a combat veteran, a Navy SEAL. Join me in welcoming Congressman Dan Crenshaw to American Freedom. Congressman, good to see you.
Good to see you, Mr. Vice President. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming. I thought on this Veterans Day here at Texas A&M that there'd be no better person to talk to about service in uniform than you. And let me just say on this Veterans Day, thank you for your service.
Well, thank you, sir.
And welcome
Appreciate
to
that.
American Freedom. In just your second term, you've emerged as one of the most important conservative voices in America. But Dan, I thought today, before we get into some reflections on current events, that I think our listeners might be interested to know your story and how you came to wear the uniform. And the challenges that you faced on your third deployment when you were injured and the long way back. Tell us about your decision to put on the uniform and what motivated you then, and take us to that deployment where you suffered the injuries that you labored to recover from for so long.
Well, sure. My story actually started here at Texas A&M because this is where my parents met. So my dad was, I guess, a senior, maybe a junior. My mom had just started her graduate degree in nutritional science, and she was bartending. Or no, he was bartending, and that's how they met at the chicken oil company. So it was here that I began my journey, and one of my biggest regrets is not going to college here. So I will say that publicly. It is a big regret. And I moved around a lot. My dad was in the oil and gas business, and we would always leave Houston, come back to Houston, go back overseas. Went to high school in Bogota, Colombia. So it was a bit of a strange upbringing, though not unfamiliar to people in the oil sector. And obviously, a lot of people here, I would assume, still study petroleum engineering like my father did. It's a great program, of course. So I'm not sure if that really affected my decision to go in the military, but it I don't know, in a way it made it more interesting because I got to see that comparison of life outside the United States to what it is to grow up here, and then gain that sense of perspective. And I think that helped me in my many travels while in the military. But I can trace my desire to go into the SEAL teams back to a book by a spicy individual named Dick Marcinko. He was the founder of SEAL Team 6, and he was really one of the first SEALs to really start writing books. Now everybody seems to do it. And so I read that book, and it just drew me in. Look, a lot of young boys are drawn to some kind of sense of adventure, some kind of sense of danger. It's a very boyish thing to be drawn to, and but then those desires maybe go away over time. You get your wits about you, and you find a different career, and that's just not what happened to me. I just kept with that dream, that sort of childhood dream. I can't remember exactly when it started, but I would say early middle school, likely. And you talk to most team guys, that's sort of a slang term for SEALs, and they started that journey very early because it's impossible to make it through BUD/S unless you truly have no choice.
Well, that's what, to me it's fascinating because you did Navy ROTC when you were at Tufts University. But you're saying early on you had a long runway toward becoming a Navy SEAL.
I only went to ROTC to join the SEAL teams.
Yeah.
There was no other options for me. I didn't want to be a pilot. Didn't want to be on a ship, didn't want to be in a submarine, didn't want to join the Army. I mean, I don't know why anybody wants to join the Army, let's just be honest. Or the Air Force, or the Marine Corps.
Now you're in trouble.
Yeah. I just like to poke them because they're all so jealous of us. Anyway.
But you talked about buds, right? And I was actually the first either president or vice president to go to visit training at Coronado, I was told, since Bill Clinton.
Really?
Was president. Yeah, I was in California, and I wanted to go out and see where the Navy SEALs trained, and literally went out on the beach while they were going through those drills, lifting the fully loaded inflatable rafts, and talking to the commanding officer there. He said to me, the nature of the training there, he said, we know what we're looking for here. And the nature of the training in BUDS is to essentially drive out anybody that doesn't have it.
Yep.
What's it?
Well, it is, it could be broadly described as a deep sense of duty and an unwillingness to quit in the face of adversity.
Unwillingness to quit.
And that's fundamentally what we're trying to drive out, right. Because they want to make it easy to quit, and they want to make it enticing. There is no cheering on your teammates. We actually don't want that, and they discourage it because as a class, you'll say, "Well, I mean, I've been with this guy. He was my roommate. I've been with him for weeks. He seems like a really good dude. Well, but he keeps trying to quit. And what's he going to do when it really gets hard? When your lives are on the line?
Right.
So you let him go." And we had this sort of saying. It's actually every class makes a Hell Week T-shirt, and on ours. And I was actually, since I had the artistic talent, I actually drew and designed our Hell Week T-shirt. And the slogan was "Let 'em go." It was "Let 'em go," and that's a little counterintuitive to people who like to operate in teams and
right.
Try to bring people up.
Right.
And you got to remember that there's a fine line. There's a fine line between dragging someone along who's a weak link and letting them go, and what's the right choice. And in a world of combat. You don't want those people with you. So they're trying to drive you out, and they'll say there's coffee and donuts. They're just waiting for you. It's so warm and nice and toasty. You can go stay at the Hotel Del. It's right down the Strand. Because Coronado is quite beautiful, and the beach is quite beautiful. But it takes us quite a while to recover from our PTSD there.
Having been there and done that, you might enjoy this. I was standing there, as a sitting vice president. I'm on the beach, and I'm there with the commanding officers, and the guys are doing their drills. And the commander looked at me and said, "Do you want to address the trainees?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Hey, I didn't come here to interrupt anything. I'm just observing." And he said, "Well, I think they actually might appreciate it." And
it's a break.
Yeah,
it means there's a break.
So I said, "Oh, well, then I'll give a talk." So then they all came over and took a knee, and I said, "I didn't come here to make a speech, but I thought you might appreciate a break." And I got the loudest hoo-ah I'd ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. So
I would have told him to hit the surf.
You would have said hit the surf? Yeah. So tell me, so you become a Navy SEAL, you go through your first 2 deployments, great success. And I know enough from my past responsibilities that when we send in the Navy SEALs, it's the very serious tip of the spear work. So there wasn't these were very serious deployments on your watch. You're in Afghanistan on your 3rd deployment in 2012, and tell us what happened and tell us the run up to that.
Well, let's see. That deployment started in the winter, late 2011. We went out. I was a SEAL Team 3, and it's a busy deployment. We were what was called the commando mission at the time, meaning we were working with Afghan commando units, which are not quite the most elite units that we trained there, but some of the more elite. And we would almost always operate by air and go all over the province, in this case Kandahar province. And it was busy. It was good. It was kind of a dream deployment for guys like us. And that's difficult for people to understand, I think, about why people even join the military, why people join, especially elite units like the SEAL teams, where you have, and especially in wartime, where you have a guarantee of danger. And it's hard for people to understand that that's kind of the point, and it makes you sound crazy. But if we're trying to honor veterans on Veterans Day, you do have to understand some of the mindsets that go into joining, especially these more elite units. And so it's a dream deployment. I mean, look, you get to go out and camp with your best friends and a bunch of guns and explosives. I'm not really sure what better life you could live. But sometimes you get blown up and sometimes you get shot. And there was a bit of combat on that particular deployment. A couple of weeks before I was hit, which was about six or 7 months into the deployment, June 15th, I believe, was the day I got hit. But even a couple of weeks before that, one of my buddies was shot right through the neck. And he's a lucky guy. We called him the alley cat because it seemed like he had 9 lives. Previous to that, he had sat down on a large, at least 10, 20-pound IED that did not go high order, and walked away unscathed.
Wow.
High order means there's low order, high order. It went low order, meaning the blasting cap went off, that initial charge went off, but it didn't hit the main charge, and then he got shot right through the neck, and basically just had a sore throat. Never even had to leave country. I know 2 guys who were shot right through the neck. And I mean through the neck. I don't mean grazed. I mean through the neck. Like he looks like Frankenstein with his scarring. It's interesting. So you can get real lucky or you can get real unlucky in these situations. And I guess I was a mix of both. People say it can always be worse. It could also be better. And I was in a situation where we were doing sort of a last-minute mission out to Helmand Province, and to support a Marine unit out there, Marine Special Operations unit. And early on that particular mission, as we're moving around, sort of gaining our footing, I would say, holding some strategic positions, which usually look like, these sort of abandoned compounds, these abandoned homes out in this rural country. That's picture rural country with mud huts everywhere, and you're sort of bounding from one to one, and there's IEDs everywhere, because that's just how they fight. Mm-hmm. You're not so concerned about their combat prowess. They're not accurate, and they're not well trained, and they're quite cowardly in how they fight. So they rely on IEDs to threaten you, and those are quite effective. And they're everywhere, and it's very unpredictable where they might be, because it's like randomness by design.
Were you on foot when it happened?
Yeah. So I didn't step on it. An interpreter of ours stepped on it, and this is a rather large one on very hard ground, which makes it a little worse, especially for me taking the blast. So I was a couple feet away. That blast hits me. Kind of feels like you got hit by a truck, and everybody in that truck was shooting you with birdshot. That's what it felt like. Much worse for him. He lost all 4 limbs right away. He later died in the hospital. And a couple people in the vicinity took some shrapnel too, but nothing serious. So, but me and him were much more serious. And I was blinded right away. I didn't know why. I was in denial for a long time about what that blindness really was. Just thought it was, or told myself it was dirt in my eyes. And I truly believed it. I mean, it's interesting psychologically thinking about it in hindsight.
But you were blind.
I was, but I didn't believe it.
Yeah.
I just believed I had mud in my eyes. So I just find it interesting that's what my mind was how my mind was processing it at the time. And then I was put out right when the helo came, landed, medics there put me out, and I didn't wake up for 5 days.
So you were conscious after.
I was conscious the whole time, yeah.
And knew you'd lost your sight, but you just weren't.
Yeah, thought it was temporary.
Right.
And I was more worried about gut wounds because I had a lot of pain everywhere.
Then you woke up.
Yeah, my face was more numb.
You woke up from an induced coma. Mm-hmm. And then the journey back. Did you? I assume you airlift out to Landstuhl at Ramstein and then to Walter Reed.
Correct. And
tell us about that journey and tell us about your incredible wife, Tara.
Yeah, and she met me in Bethesda, and that's the hell really began when I woke up in Landstuhl, and there's a tube getting ripped out of my mouth. A very vivid memory of this.
That's the medical center at Ramstein Air Base in Germany.
Right. Yeah, that's where we all make that stop.
Right. Everybody immediately comes off the battlefield and goes there.
And that's where hell really began because, the injuries have really set in at this point. I can't move. I'm deeply swollen and cut up. I'm a mess. And I'm hallucinating wildly, too. Because, when you're blind, and you could try this at home, black out your vision for a couple days, and you will start having very, very vivid. Especially if you've gone through trauma, you might characterize them as hallucinations. But the ability of your mind to create images becomes much more acute. It's really, because it's happened to me again about 6 months ago when my retina detached and I was blind
I remember.
again. Yeah,
That's the last time we were together.
Yeah,
Was
yeah.
when you had that,
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
but you're in great shape now.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
all
I
relieved
got
and
really
answered
lucky.
prayer.
Yeah, I got really lucky. So it was not fun. Because it was also very uncertain whether the surgery that we needed to happen would work. Doctors were not very certain about it. To save my left eye, I mean, the right eye was gone at this point.
Right.
And but it was very uncertain that any kind of surgery would work and that I'd really regain any kind of vision at all, let alone what I have now, which is complicated but correctable vision.
But Tara, you talk about her faith and your faith, and you all just
She was
kept moving forward.
And she was by my side the whole time, and it's important. It's important to note how, unfortunately, that's not a guarantee. We would see other veterans there in the Wounded Warrior ward, and their wife had left them for it, and that happens. And so that's a sad but true reality that some vets have to deal with.
Well, she's an amazing person. And I know you're headed to Disney World again for the 20th
For her birthday.
time. It's very soon. And I hope you'll give her our best. It's Veterans Day, but I think every American recognizes that our spouses are the hometown heroes.
Yeah.
And especially in these circumstances. So let's hear it for all of our military spouses around America. And you give Tara our thanks.
And that's true. When you meet SEAL team wives, it's definitely a very different breed. They're tough, and
They have to be.
yeah, it's harder. In many ways, it is harder to be on the home front because you don't have any knowledge of what's going on. You have no certainty. You're just living your normal life, and yet this person who your soulmate is not, and you don't exactly know what they're doing. You don't exactly know when you're going to get that call. I mean, the only consolation Tara had was that when she got the word about me, it wasn't a guy in uniform at the door, because that's a guarantee that you're gone.
Yeah.
A call just means it's really, really bad. But, and when this happened to her, when she got the news, she was also getting, there's a lot of different word coming back about how grave the situation was. And to this day, I'm still a little confused about that. Maybe I was in worse condition than I thought. I do have a tendency to react badly to anesthesia. This was not my first rodeo as far as going under anesthesia and getting injured. Before this deployment, my buddies would joke that they would be fine because bullets would go around them and hit me because I was so accident prone. I'd already been shot in training. Just for ricochets. Just like, how did that even happen? I mean, these kind of things. I'd had my hand crushed in a rollover and a vehicle rollover, which I caused, to be fair. But jaw broken, teeth knocked out. It just happened a lot to me. My left tibia was broken in Hell Week, my first Hell Week. So I was already pretty accident prone. And so then everybody was like, oh, geez, we shouldn't have joked about that because he really got hurt. And of course, then they immediately started making fun of my eye, right? Because that's what guys do.
Of course.
Yeah. And, but no, the wives have it much harder, I think. Family members have it much harder. And I say that especially on Memorial Day. And Memorial Day is a real special day. And it's more important, I think, to remember the families left behind than because, look, we sacrifice doing what we love. Like I said, you go camping out camping with your best friends and a bunch of guns. I'm not really sure what better kind of life there is. We acknowledge that and pursue it, but that's not necessarily the case with the family who gets left behind.
Well, you said you sacrifice for what you love. The families we get our arms around on Memorial Day sacrifice who they love, and for them every day is Memorial Day.
Yeah.
So God bless them all. So well said. So you recovered, thank God. Actually went back into active duty, deployed Twice more were elected to Congress in 2018. So before we let you go, I can't have a veteran of Afghanistan, a combat veteran, on this podcast without speaking about the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. I've talked to veterans around the country since that took place, and I've said to them, I just know in my heart that had President Trump and I been reelected, it never would have happened. The deal that was struck in February of 2020 came with a credible threat of the use of force. We had just taken out Qasem Soleimani. We had just, a few months earlier, taken down Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The Taliban knew that there was a commander-in-chief in the United States who would use force to protect our troops and our interests in the region. Is that what was missing in this withdrawal? And I know you've had very strong opinions about the withdrawal, but give us your broad reaction and give us your sense of what happened.
Well, I mean, a complete disaster and heartbreaking. We're going to continue to see heartbreaking stories coming out of Afghanistan. There will be an endless array of them, and we should, unfortunately, Americans have to get used to it and deal with it, because if we're being honest, the vast majority of Americans wanted Biden to do exactly what he did. And I have no problem saying that. I've always been on one side of this debate, and that's put me at odds with some people on our own side, and all liberals on the side as well, because they've always wanted out. That whether it would have happened under President Trump or not, I think it's irrelevant, because he never did it. He just never did it. He never made the decision to screw it up. And I think that's the best defense of the administration. He had 4 years to screw this up, and he didn't. He didn't, and there was a very,
as you know, better than most Americans. We went 18 months without a single American casualty.
Right. If anything, it got better. And I think we had a good balance by the end of that. I think Joe Biden was delivered what I would call a very decent balance. And there's a lot of people who have this black and white view of our foreign policy there, where it's either zero troops or it's an endless war. Right. And I'm sorry, but it's neither. It's neither. There's something in between. And what Joe Biden was given when he started his presidency was a pretty sustainable, perhaps a stalemate, if you will, where you could continue counterterrorism operations in an effective way. And also, by the way, have a base that happens to be close to China, Iran, and Russia. A high-end military air base, Bagram.
You spent a lot of time at Bagram. I visited there when I had your job you have now and the job I just recently had. How bad a decision was it to abandon Bagram Air Force Base in the middle of the night without alerting our allies and literally turn it over?
Bad, and a lot of people want to blame our military for this and how they withdrew. And I tell people that this isn't the right way to look at it. Secretary Austin has given a very, very specific order. You will go to zero troops except for what you need to defend the embassy in Kabul. Okay, well, given that parameter, there is no way to keep Bagram. And if you listen to his testimony, he's very careful about this, because he's not trying to throw his boss under the bus. But what he's telling us is, I had no choice. We suggested that we keep Bagram. The military suggested the same things to Joe Biden that they suggested to Trump.
That's right.
And that was
I know
certainly
that they
keep Bagram.
the president, our administration.
Exactly. And Biden just didn't listen. He did not listen. And they had intel. They had intel before this withdrawal that the Taliban would take over and take over quickly. Mm-hmm. And anytime the Taliban takes over, you're going to see this mess that we saw now. And we should forever be embarrassed by what happened as Americans and for who we elected to do it. It's just a shame.
Harry Truman had that sign on the desk, "The buck stops here," in the Oval Office. And I've said to people around the country that there's one person who needs to be held accountable for the disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan, and that's President Joe Biden.
100%.
And I believe the American people will continue to hold him accountable, and those that have supported him. Before I let you go, just so beyond the policy of that, you fought there, you lost friends there, you were injured there. For 20 years, courageous Americans like you went to Afghanistan and defended freedom and defended our nation. My view is that there's nothing in that disastrous withdrawal that will ever take away from the service and sacrifice of everyone who served over those 20 years and made it possible for us to come to the 20th anniversary of 9/11 without a major terrorist attack on American soil. What say you?
That's exactly right. When people ask, because people are so emotional about our presence there, and I find it fascinating because they're not emotional about our presence in Japan or South Korea or Germany or Italy or Spain or the literally over 100 countries where you have special operations forces operating on a daily basis. Nobody's emotional about that, but we get very emotional about this because it's just at the top of our minds. And people say, well, what are we getting out of this? And I tell them very simply, no more 9/11s.
Right.
Don't forget that we weren't at war on September 10th, 2001, but somebody was at war with us, and they're still at war with us. Now they just have more operating space and time and resources to kill us. But they never stopped the war. And it was foolish of us to pretend that we could. It was very foolish. And this is just one of those things where I think over the course of 20 years, leaders did not do a good job helping the American people understand what it was our goal was there. Right. Why you would send someone like me there. I'm an insurance policy. It really is as simple as that. And people are like, oh, it makes them feel bad. They don't like that idea. I'm like, and I say, well, I don't care if you don't like it. You can go write a fiction novel about how you wish the world was. But the world is not that way, and you need to live in reality. And there's no good choices here. You know, it's either you stick your head in the sand, you make yourself an easy target, or you send brave men and women out there to do the dirty work. And that's life.
We had courageous men and women, a generation of which you're a distinguished part, who went and fought them there so that it wouldn't happen again here.
And it worked.
And it worked. It didn't happen.
And as you said, in the end of your administration, 18 months of not a single casualty. Right. Hard to call that an emergency situation that we need to end right away. Yeah. And yet that's so it's sort of how the public started to view it, and it ended in disaster as a result.
He's a Navy SEAL. You've gotten to know him a little bit better. Now, when you see him on television, you'll know that he's not just an extremely well-spoken conservative congressman, but he's an extraordinary American patriot. Congressman Dan Crenshaw, thank you for being with us on American Freedom. And on this Veterans Day, thank you for your service.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your service as Vice President. Mr. Vice President, it's a true honor to do this with you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dan. We'll be right back.